Part 277. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2766. The emperor praised Mr. Zhuang, and then said, "Since Mr. Zhuang taught you, then tell me, how to make them fear, and how to show benevolence and righteousness." Bai Erlang, threats to intimidate them. Give me more grace. The emperor waved to him, come and tell me, how can we threaten and intimidate them in such a situation, and then apply kindness? Shiro. He finally drooped his head and went back to find Bai Shan. At this time, they had already lived in a small town, and people outside the gate of the domestic city were still going to besiege the city every day. It's all about fighting. Because of his injury, Bai Shan has been keeping his room closed for the past few days, and even Bai Erlang didn't know that he was pretending to be injured. He also pays attention to himself. Even in the room, there is no one else, and he sleeps on his stomach or side with a pillow. Bai Erlang told him sadly, in front of Zhao Qiuagong, "Your Majesty has given me 2 days to come up with a solution. Please help me think about it." Bai Shan, I can't think of it for a while, but your opinion is correct, that is, the operability is very low. That's it, Bai Erlang said annoyed. Now the officers, soldiers, and people of the inner city are all huddled out of the city, and both sides rely on roars to talk, and basically they quarrel when they meet. What can we talk about? The people on the city tower and outside the city gate are all determined people. How could they be able to threaten and intimidate people with just a few words? Bai Erlang sighed, it would be great if I could see the people in the inner city, even if I told them a book or some gossip, but unfortunately I can't even get the news of Lord Zhang, let alone let's go. After preaching, and threatening people, then apply merit. Bai Shan, who had no idea at all, heard the words thoughtfully, you're right. What? Bai Shandao, it's impossible to tell a book, but you can write a book. He said, when you write an article, the first half is a threat, and the second half is a lure. I don't believe that the people in the inner city have no relatives and friends in these villages and towns outside the city, and there are several nearby towns. They must have relatives and friends. Your Majesty is now cooking porridge inside and outside the city. Recently, the people in the small town have a lot less resentment towards Feng Shangzhu, and they have a good impression of us new Jin troops, so this is feasible. How can I write an article and send it in? Let the Kongming lanterns be sent over, and we will set the Kongming lanterns on a day when the west wind blows. What if they don't know how to read? Bai Erlang felt that they needed to consider various issues. Maybe what if they don't know Chinese characters? Goguryeo uses the same Mandarin and characters as ours, so why don't you know it? Bai Shan said. However, there are few ordinary people who can read and write, so this point needs to be considered. If this is the case, then draw the article into a picture. Bai Shan said, if you don't know how to read, you always know how to draw, right? Bai Erlang pointed his finger at his nose and asked, I paint. Bai Shan, if you don't paint, should I still paint? Are you embarrassed to bully a wounded person? Bai Erlang exclaimed, do you think I can draw it? Why not? Although your painting skills really don't have any skills at all, you can still draw things clearly. Otherwise, wouldn't you be blind to study for a few years? Bai Shan said, if you want to paint, what are you afraid of? So Bai Erlang went to find the emperor. After he came out, he took a lot of paper and sent it to Bai Shan's house. Then he went to the gate of the city to look at the Goguryeo people who were picking up the porridge with their heads supported. His demeanor and words were recorded. When Man Bao passed by while riding a horse, he saw that he left the team and came over. He looked at him curiously and asked, what are you doing? As soon as Bai Erlang saw her, he asked, didn't you go to the prison camp? Why did you come back? Joe man, I'll be back when I'm done. She dismounted, squatted with him and looked at the refugees who were queuing for porridge, and saw that the numbness on their faces was much less. There is a result at the prison camp. In the past few days, she obeyed the imperial decree, and in addition to treating the Jin soldiers, she went to the prison camp. The prisoners in the prison camp have always been in a state of life and death. Except for some special people, after most of the Goguryeo soldiers were captured, the emperor would ask Zhao Qiuagong to count the number and place of origin, and then send the people back to their original places. Except for a few people, no one will run back to the domestic city to continue serving as a soldier. Most of them sneak back to their hometown. There is no way to do this. They don't have much rations, and they can't raise so many prisoners. It's better to give each of them 2 or 3 meals of dry food, and then let them find a way to go home. As for this group of Goguryeo soldiers who had just been captured, the emperor had to give them a lot of preferential treatment. He didn't let them go, and even transferred an imperial physician like Zhou Man over there to treat their wounds every day. It's to buy people's hearts. As soon as Bai Erlang heard that her mission had been completed, his eyes suddenly brightened, and he got up and said, "Then what are you doing? Go back and report." Then he doesn't have to think of a way, right? Man Bao glanced at him and said, "It is true that the rat has the way of the rat, and the snake has the snake's way, but the snake's way is not easy to walk." In addition to Zhou Man, Shui Bei, who is honest, has also been working in the prison camp, so Man Bao is waiting for him to come and report to the emperor. The 5 prisoners who came to surrender, they used to be a formation patrolling the city wall. Man Bao said, they said that one year, prisoners fled from the inner city, and the city gates were kept closed, but the people disappeared. They were patrolling. When I was visiting, I found that there was a hole in the city wall under the moat, because the moat was originally connected to the inside and outside of the city. That section is quite special. Usually few people go there. In the spring and autumn period, the hole was revealed again. Shui Bei added, they have reported it before, but because the inner city is in the hinterland of Goguryeo, such a small hole is harmless, so it has never been repaired. Zhao Qiuagong immediately asked, the hole is still there now? Exist. But, Man Bao said with a frown, it's too cold now, and there are ice floes floating in the river. It's very easy to get into the water at this time. The emperor and others felt that this was a small problem. Certain sacrifices were normal. He also ordered the formation of death squads to attack the city. However, the generals were reluctant to take the lives of their soldiers to fill the war without results. The emperor felt heartbroken when he thought about it. Finally gave up. However, now this path can be fruitful. Once people enter the city and get close to the city gate, then they are half successful. The emperor asked, are all the warriors you asked you to choose still there? Zhao Qiuagong responded immediately, yes. The emperor nodded slightly, screen again, and weed out those who can't swim. Let them try to go into the water in the past 2 days, and don't rush. Then he turned his head to look at Bai Erlang, how about the way you think? You have to think of a way before they move. It's best if you can make the hearts of the inner city float. Bai Erlang could only go back silently and continue to watch the refugees. The double monthly pass has officially started. At the end of the monthly pass will expire if you don't vote. Please ask for a monthly pass. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2767. Bai Erlang wrote the article first. Originally, he wanted to talk about it at length, but half of the writing felt that the people in the inner city would not appreciate his good literary talent. So he crossed it out, scratched his face, and wrote threatening words in the style he was best at. Bai Shan and the others went to the gate of the city to persuade them to surrender. There were no charges against the few Goguryeo kings and the royal family of the Gao clan. He copied it directly, and then wrote about the battle at the city gate. First, the king of Goguryeo fought hard for him with generals and soldiers. If you can give up, how can you know that he will not give up you for his own power and wealth in the future? Whether it is outstanding ability like Shen Ming, or loyal like those 2,000 soldiers, the king of Goguryeo can give up. He also threatened that the emperor was very angry with the king of Goguryeo for being so perverted, especially since this battle also hurt the emperor's favorite general, General Kibi Heli. So are you sure you want to bear the anger of Dajin with the king of Goryeo? After threatening, he turned his head and compared how the king of Goguryeo treated his people, and how the emperor from afar treated the people of Liaodong. The royal family of the Gao family has not increased their dues in the past 2 years. This year, in order to use the army against Dajin and Silabaikia, they have increased a lot of taxes. In the past 3 months, they have paid taxes 3 times in a row. The people in the inner city are better. So far, they have donated twice, but they also know about the situation outside. I heard that in places farther away, not only the royal court's dues and taxes, but also a part of the local taxes must be paid. The day is even more difficult. These are all data, specific to the date and the extra tax to be paid by each household. Of course, Bai Erlang can't have time to check the data. This is what Bai Shan told him. At this moment, he was sitting on the table not far from Bai Shan's bed, burying his head in writing, and handed one to Bai Shan. Bai Shan rested his arms on the bed and watched with relish, and said to him, "Write a few more specific stories, such as the stories of those refugees who go to the city gate to get porridge every day because they don't have rice at home." Bai Erlang scratched his head, but wouldn't that push Feng Shangshu out? Bai Shan glanced at him and said, "Skip this matter, just write about the 3 additional donations made by the king of Goguryeo, how they prepared food for each additional donation, and then jump directly to the current issue of donating porridge." Bai Erlang nodded and got a clue. Is it also about painting these stories? Yes, Bai Shan said, you write out all the manuscripts and draw them. I will ask Mr. Fang to find some documents for you, and transcribe these manuscripts and drawings. Bai Erlang is not very confident. Can Kongming Lantern really bring these papers into the domestic city? You can try it outside the city first, Bai Shan said. Go and ask Qin Tianjian. Bai Erlang nodded and stared at Bai Shan. Your injury has recovered so quickly. Can you get up now? Only then did Bai Shan realize that he was about to sit up for the convenience of reading the manuscript, so he immediately lay down again. Man Bao's medicine is good. Bai Erlang was very skeptical. General Kibi has only been awake for 2 days, and his body is so hot that he can't even drink water. Why are you? It looks like you can get out of bed and jump around. Bai Shan lay on the bed and said, I'm young and recover quickly. Bai Erlang pouted and didn't ask any more. That's all, they're all brothers, he just didn't ask. Bai Erlang spread out the paper, thought about it, and wrote a story. He sat at the city gate to watch the refugees receive porridge for the past 2 days. Naturally, he talked to them and knew some people's affairs. When Man Bao came back, he could just ask the stories of some hard-working soldiers in the prison camp. It's not easy to draw. Since your back injury has little effect on your arm, then you can help me draw a picture. Bai Shan thought for a while and then said, you can keep the story you wrote. Bai Erlang left happily. Bai Shan looked at him, waited for a while and saw that he didn't respond, then asked, why haven't you left yet? Bai Erlang said, I'll wait for Man Bao to come back. Bai Shan continued to lie still. There is indeed a lot of material in Man Bao. The wounded Goguryeo soldiers who can fall into her hands have tragic stories. Just being abandoned by Goguryeo on the battlefield is very pitiful. Man Bao spoke with relish, and Bai Erlang remembered it with relish while holding a small book, and even Bai Shan was fascinated by it. Man Bao spoke excitedly, and went to Bai Erlang to read the story he had written, and said, I'll draw too, I'm good at drawing now. Bai Erlang disliked it. Your paintings are not as good as mine. Just say if you want me to help. Bai Erlang firmly said, yes. But the main force was Bai Shan. As soon as Bai Erlang left, he got up from the bed, closed the doors and windows, spread out the paper, and drew according to the story written by Bai Erlang. The three of them worked together to finish the story and the drawing in one night, and then Bai Shan handed the things over to Daji and asked him to take it to Master Fang to find someone to transcribe. Man Bao and Bai Erlang went to the wild with a stack of white paper and the Kongming lantern that Bai Shan had made in the house. An official of Qin Tianjian joined them and pointed to Xiaocheng Road. After arriving at the designated position. The east wind is blowing now. Standing at this position, the Kongming lantern can float to the small city after it is lifted into the sky. Man Bao put the stack of white paper in the half-opened cloth bag, and fastened the tied rope before lighting the candle with Bai Erlang. The Kongming lantern swayed up, and when it rose to about the same height as Zhou Man, the car went up and down for a while, and it couldn't fly for a long time. Crowd. The official of Qin Tianjian couldn't help but say, is it too heavy? When Bai Erlang heard this, he quickly pulled out half of the paper. The Kongming lantern was about to fall to the ground, but with this lightning, it swayed erratically. Get up and fly higher and farther under their earnest expectation. A gust of wind was blowing, and the official of Qintian's supervision. He turned his head and glanced at the two people who were still looking up at Kongming Deng in amazement. Just as he was about to speak, a gust of wind blew with a larger experience. Qin Tianjian immediately closed his mouth and watched with bright eyes as they flew farther and farther away. The Kongming lantern. Fortunately, not to lose face in front of colleagues. That day, a strange thing happened in the small town, and the paper was thrown out of the sky for no reason. The emperor felt different when he heard it, and thought it was Goguryeo who had made a move, so he hurriedly called Yin Li over to question him. Before anyone came, he had already crushed the Goguryeo king several times in his heart. Yin Li said, those white papers were blown into the city by the concubine and Zhou Man on the Kongming lantern. Emperor, why? Yin Li said he didn't understand either. So when Zhou Man and Bai Erlang went back happily, they were stopped by the guards of the imperial guards waiting at the street entrance, and they were brought to the emperor together with Qin Tianjian. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2768. The emperor flipped through the articles and paintings in his hands, and put it down for a long time. I see that the brush strokes on this are different. Who painted them? Man Bao's heart was beating violently, and he said quickly, go back to your majesty. We have asked Master Fang to help us, and we have asked many people to help with drawing and copying. The emperor thought that the manuscript was drawn by a different person, nodded, looked at Bai Erlang with a little appreciation, and asked, you wrote this article and these stories? Bai Erlang responded with a yes, and then said, the article was directed by Bai Shan. He wrote down a lot of information, and Zhou Man told me more than half of the story. The emperor glanced at Zhou Man next to him, and said to him, why is it so rude to call senior sister and senior brother? Bai Erlang, senior sister. Man Bao shivered, glanced at Bai Erlang, and answered hesitantly in front of the emperor, huh. The emperor was very satisfied with this, and said to them, senior sister and brother should respect each other. Well, you have done a good job in this matter, Erlang. You can spend the past few days with Shuigui. The results of the raid by the Bullthorn history are written down and attached to the article, so that you have everything ready within 2 days, and everything should be ready before noon the day after tomorrow. It's already afternoon, it's not 2 days at all, okay. At most a day and a half, that time is too tight. The two were about to bargain when the emperor said, all the literate people in the army will be dispatched by you. So in the afternoon, Many people were called to copy stories and articles, and those who knew how to draw also went to draw, and artisans in the army were recruited to make Kongming lanterns. At noon the day after tomorrow, the wind was bright and the sun was shining, and there was no wind at all. The official of Qin Tianjian said, "If you put it on at this time, the Kongming lantern will not be able to fly into the city." The emperor was a little unhappy and asked, "When will it be released?" He deliberately rushed to the main business from the small town, not to blow air, so he used his eyes to persecute the officials of Qin Tianjian. Qin Tianjian official, he can't make wind out of thin air, can he? So he ignored the emperor. Anyway, there is no wind now, and it is useless to force him. The emperor could only wait with Zhou Man Bei Erlang and others, waiting for the wind to come. Fortunately, this is winter, the wind is still often. The Qin Tianjian official felt the direction of the wind and said to everyone, "This position is not suitable, we have to change it." Change, anyway, the outside of the three sides of the domestic city are now occupied by the Jin army, as long as he does not say that he wants to go to the easternmost place to put Kongming lanterns, the emperor can satisfy him. So the group changed places under the escort of the imperial army. After half an hour, a few lanterns swayed up and floated to the inner city with Bai Erlang's efforts over the past few days. Under everyone's attention, the Kongming lantern floated into the domestic city, the rope that was specially wrapped inside was burnt, and the half-open cloth bag tied under the rope fell down with the rope, and was blown by the wind in the air, rolling over. A lot of paper flew out. The paper swayed down lightly, some flew to a farther place, and some fell directly. Naturally, Bai Erlang and the others could not see them. In order to ensure that the rope would be blown when the Kongming lantern flew over the domestic city, they chose a place far away under the guidance of Qin Tianjian, only to see the Kongming lantern flying into the country from a distance. City, I don't know what the result will be. So they stood in place and waited. After a long time, the imperial guard came back quickly to report, saying, "Your Majesty, I saw that the articles on the Kongming lantern flew down." The emperor asked excitedly, "Are you sure?" "Sure." "Okay," the emperor was overjoyed and immediately said, "Put all the Kongming lanterns out." So everyone went to light the Kongming lantern together. Bai Erlang and Man Bao were the most excited, one carried the Kongming lantern, the other lit the lamp, and whispered, "It's a pity that Bai Shan couldn't come to set the Kongming lantern. You know, even in the capital, they rarely have the opportunity to put lights on. Unlike today, they can put as many lights as they want." Man Bao and Bai Erlang cooperated, put 12 lamps in one breath, and watched them staggeringly fly into the sky, and they felt very relieved. Every time a Kongming lantern is released, 2 people have to make a wish. There are 12 lanterns, each with 12 wishes, and there are no duplicates. The emperor also wanted to put 3 lamps. When he turned his head and saw that they were still muttering, he couldn't help but say, "This is not a Kongming lantern for wishing." Man Bao asked, "It's all Kongming lanterns, isn't there an extra rope underneath? What's the difference?" The emperor couldn't tell the difference, he could only say, "You all have a little wish, even if you make a wish, you should also promise to break through the inner city as soon as possible, and the eastern expedition will end. This is the Kongming lantern that was put on for the war. You make random personal wishes, be careful it's too heavy to fly." Zhou Man and Bai Erlang, maybe they have made this wish, and if the wish is too heavy, it will fall off. This wish is even more important, okay. There are 80 or 90 Kongming lanterns soaring into the sky, and the emperor deliberately collected 99 lanterns for auspiciousness. They flew with difficulty in the air along the wind, and then at a certain moment, they were all shocked, the whole lamp was much more relaxed, and they flew faster and farther. In the domestic city, it was raining paper, and many articles and paintings floated down from the sky and fell into various streets. At this time, it was the time when ordinary people were going home to eat in the afternoon. Although there were fewer pedestrians than usual because of the siege of the city, there were still a lot of people. These people bent over to pick up the paper that had fallen on the ground, and subconsciously looked up into the air. Some people didn't see anything, and some people saw the Kongming lantern floating in the air. In broad daylight, who is putting on the Kongming lantern? Shouldn't this be put at night? He shouted in a terrified spirit, isn't this a signal for the Jin army to attack? Then will this paper be poisonous? As soon as these words came out, many people who picked up things were so frightened that they threw away the paper in their hands, looking horrified. The literate person scanned the article on the paper and said in a complicated way, it's not a signal, there is a crusade book written on it. What is a crusade book? Those who can read will read the article out. The vernacular written by Bai Erlang is easy to understand, and the common people can understand it as soon as they hear it. Not everyone is literate. Many people picked up a picture of a figure. The people on it were doing well at first, then they got worse and worse, and finally the emperor of Jin state made porridge for relief after almost starving to death. This painting is very easy to understand. Although there is not a single word on it, the familiar clothes made them recognize at a glance that it was a yamen. The grain and linen that were carried away and went back and forth 3 times. The increasingly crooked protagonist let them know that it was a 3-time increase. The people in the city immediately felt the same feelings when they saw these paintings. Some people couldn't help crying when they saw the people in the paintings pushed their daughters out and handed them over to someone to take away. In order to cope with the war, many of them need to sell their sons and daughters to raise taxes, and this war should not have started, if their king took the initiative to attack the Yingzhou of Jin. See you tomorrow, double monthly pass for monthly pass. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2770. When the king of Goguryeo learned of this, the papers that were flying down had already been picked up, and even the soldiers who dispatched were unable to retrieve all the papers. And some scholars and literate people have quietly memorized the article and spread it to the whole domestic city. The hearts of the domestic city are floating. In particular, they did not completely cut off contact with the outside world. The Jin army was raiding the towns around the inner city, and the Goguryeo king and the generals and officials in the court knew that the inner city was almost isolated and surrounded. In the past few days, many people have questioned the previous strategies of Ganasa and the king of Goguryeo. Although they hit the Jin generals in that battle, they lost even more. Not only did they lose a general, but they also lost 2,000 soldiers and horses. In comparison, the losses of the Jin army were not worth mentioning. In particular, there are so many generals in the state of Jin, who severely damaged Bai Li, as well as Ashina, Fengliang, Xuebei and Xuegui. Even their second prince of Goguryeo became one of their generals. If it wasn't for that trick, the Jin army would not have been so embarrassed that they would have directly attacked nearby towns that had no strategic significance, so that they could not even collect food and grass quietly. Coupled with the frequent occurrence of various incidents recently, the king of Goguryeo sent many ministers who used to serve as the second high school prince to prison because of the treason of the second high school prince. Many ministers felt that the Goguryeo king was unkind. No one would have imagined that the second high school prince would betray the country. He was far away in Ungshi city. How did these ministers in the inner city know that he was going to surrender? Because the second high school prince surrendered and sinned against these officials who had spoken good things for the second high school prince, then how could you still be embarrassed to live? These people are only courtiers, but King Goguryeo is the father of the second prince, shouldn't he be more responsible? And his son was not the only one who betrayed the second prince, the fifth prince is still in prison. From the son to the father, to be honest, some ministers were still muttering in their hearts, they were worried that the king of Goguryeo would also surrender. If the king surrenders, then Liaodong will be taken back by Jin, and this war will definitely need someone to bear the blame. Who is the best fit? Of course it was their ministers. Just thinking about it made them tremble with fear, so during this period of time, despite the excitement in the domestic city because of the last war, there were not a lot of people who came into contact with Zhang Hui in the prison in private. Of course, they will not come forward in person, but have selected some family members to contact them. Zhang Hui's life was a little better than before. He learned the news from the Yamen guarding the Tianjing, and immediately asked the fifth prince to inquire. At night, he got a copy of the thing that fell from the sky. Zhang Hui scanned the crusade document with one eye and 10 lines, and put it aside, very disdainful. Although this article was written in an easy-to-understand manner, it had no technical content at all, and it was not worth reading. On the contrary, these short stories and paintings are good, but just a cursory look makes people feel the same. The fifth prince of Gao leaned on the wall and asked, "Master Zhang, what's the use of jinns throwing these things?" Zhang Hui said, "It is very useful. Today's sages have a saying that is very good. The people are like water, and the king is like a boat. Water can carry a boat and capsize it. The fifth prince, the inner city is defended by soldiers, not by ordinary people." Zhang Hui relied on the fact that the fifth prince couldn't see himself, smiled contemptuously and said, "Aren't soldiers and soldiers also citizens? Even, they should feel more empathy than ordinary people, because the king of Goguryeo just gave up 2,000 soldiers not long ago, just to restore morale." Well, the articles and stories are written like this, the people in the city also say the same, and many soldiers believe it. Bai Erlang led people along with Qin Tianjian to set Kongming lanterns everywhere every day, and the king of Goguryeo was so angry that he ordered the Kongming lanterns to be shot down with arrows. Not to mention whether the arrow can reach the Kongming lantern or not, it means that it can reach the Kongming lantern. The hit Kongming lantern fell with a squeak, and the paper in the half-opened cloth bag flew down faster as it tumbled. King of Goguryeo. He was so angry that he cut down the shooter. As a result, the atmosphere in the city was even more tense, and even the people did not dare to go out into the street, but in order to wait for new floating papers, many people would go out for a walk around noon. The stories that fall every day are different, and the paintings are also different. They still like to watch them. And in this hopeful and tense atmosphere, 100 people selected by Zhao Qiuagong stood in front of Zhou Man one evening. Man Bao could only pour a bowl of medicine for them. "This medicine can prevent you from getting cold, so drink it all." Hundreds of people picked up their bowls and went to work together, then wiped their mouths and followed the Goguryeo captive to a moat. Zhao Qiuagong personally sent the people to the river and said to them, "This general and his majesty are waiting for you to return in triumph." Hundreds of people did not speak, but gave a military salute in unison, and then quietly got on the small canoe in the dark. During this period of time, the soldiers patrolling the city walls were much more relaxed, especially in the past 2 days. Those who were staring at them found that the soldiers who used to pass every quarter of an hour might not come once for half an hour. Hundreds of people silently paddled under the city wall. This is a relatively remote city wall and river. Under the guidance of the prisoners, they saw that there seemed to be a missing piece in the rippling water. A soldier reached out and touched it and reported in a low voice, "There is a hole, but the river is not shallow, and although it is exposed, the boat can't get through. It also leaves a head or so of the water, so if they want to get in from here, they have to go into the water." They knew this early on, and they were already prepared, but when they really reached out and touched the icy water, the warrior who was singled out shrank his neck. Then they gritted their teeth and slid into the water. They stuck their heads out to breathe, and their heads almost touched the city wall. This hole was washed away, the section was very uneven, and a section was even completely submerged in the water. They could only hold their breath. Diving over. When they enter the city, the real test begins. They have no identity here, and they have to avoid the patrolling soldiers and even ordinary people in the city, so they are very dangerous. As soon as they landed, they shivered and got into an alley, carried the wind behind their backs and unwrapped the baggage they were holding with oil paper. After taking out their clothes, they took off their clothes and put them on. A group of people huddled together to discuss in a low voice, "What should I do? It's so cold, and it's so dark, there's no one there, how can I find a place?" One person shivered and took out the map. "Zhao Qiagong has drawn a map for us. We are here now. General Gao's courtyard is here. Let's go from here." Gao Ji was standing in the yard looking at the moon and was sad. It was his sadness that the city of Ungshi was destroyed. He thought more than once, if the city gate could be tightly guarded at that time. But he didn't expect that this time. He wanted to do something to break the gate of the inner city, and he still used the most disdainful method. The next chapter is around 11 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2771. At noon on the 28th of October, the people on the street habitually looked up at the sky and did not see the familiar Kongming lantern. Everyone was a little disappointed. Will the Kongming lantern not come today? A lot of soldiers with knives suddenly appeared on the street, and they were left behind every 20 paces. They also looked up to the sky from time to time, and then drove away. "These people with big knives, walk around," the king said, "those things are all Jin state deceives people's hearts, and I don't know what evil things are on it, you should take less. Drive away the people along the street." The people were frightened and angry, and they panicked when they ran back. Some children were so frightened that they cried loudly. The scene was even more chaotic, and there was a loud arguing, when suddenly I heard a faint and urgent sound of a gong. This is a gong that only beats when the water is running. Everyone could not help but follow the sound of the gong and see the fire in the sky. Not only the soldiers, but also the people were startled and exclaimed, "The water is gone, let's go. The water is out, put out the fire now." Everyone ran towards the place where the fire was burning. The soldiers hesitated and didn't move, and some people couldn't help cursing, "I haven't done the right thing, but bullying our people is very high. Now that the fire is on fire, I don't know how to save it, and I'm not afraid to give the whole city." The soldiers didn't move, they just listened to the commander's orders. Their commander frowned, looked at the direction of the fire, and was very worried. "Come here, go and see where the fire is." Yes. The person who set the fire was hiding in the alley at this time. Seeing that the fire was getting bigger and bigger, and besides the people onlookers would pour some water to wet the nearby houses, there was no firefighter to put out the fire, let alone the soldiers. One couldn't help but ask, "Boss, won't this fire get out of control?" "No," the boss scratched his head and said, "I saw it on purpose." The fire looked big, but it was easy to extinguish when the fire brigade came. Their purpose is to attract all the patrolling people nearby, and then touch the tower. At the same time, this fire also sends a signal to people outside the city. So far, their plan has gone well. But the fire was out of control. First, the yeomen and soldiers arrived too late, and the people nearby gathered a lot, but they came too late. The second is that it is winter, the weather is dry, and the fire is difficult to control. The third is that the fire was burning, and suddenly there was a gust of wind, and the house next door was also set on fire. Several people hiding in the crowd were stunned. Seeing that the fire was getting bigger and bigger, and more people were alarmed. They looked at each other, quietly retreated, and turned and ran away. They ran back to their new destination, another courtyard of Gaoji, and reported the matter to their generals. When the general heard this, he was surprised. "Didn't you just set fire to the courtyard of the second high school, Prince?" "Yeah, we just set a fire. Who knew that they didn't have a firefighting wardens here, and even the wardens who patrolled the streets came very late. There was another gust of wind, and the fire couldn't be controlled. General, why don't we go to the city? Get your hands on the door." When the general heard it, he immediately asked, "Are there more soldiers from here to patrol the city gate?" "Not much, they all ran to put out the fire," he said. "We met face to face when we ran back, and they didn't even suspect us. The ginseng turned around in place, but we still can't contact Master Zhang, and we can't contact the outside world. If we do it, there will be no people outside the city to help. General, Xiao is willing to go out by water to deliver letters." After hearing this, the generals hesitated for a while and nodded. Then a few people sneaked out and went to the edge of the moat. At this time, the sky was bright. Fortunately, this section is remote, and few people usually come here. Everyone looked up at the city gate together. According to the prisoner, this hole was not a secret among their soldiers. Many people knew that there was such a place, so if they were discovered by the soldiers patrolling the city wall, everyone watched for a while. Said, "It's been so long, and even the soldiers on a tour haven't come, maybe it's okay." The sergeant also felt that he could not delay any longer, so he said to the person who took the initiative to invite Ying, "You go, tell the general manager, and say that we will make moves around you when you are." It was getting dark by then, one of the two most sleepy times in one's life. The soldier bit the letter wrapped in oiled paper in his mouth, and then quietly went into the water. Not only did the patrols in the city fail to find the soldier, but even the guards who were mainly staring at the situation outside the city failed to spot him. When Zhao Qiagong received the letter, he inquired about the situation of the soldiers in the inner city, and immediately got up to look for the emperor. "Your Majesty, the time has come." The emperor took the letter and read it, his eyes lit up, he closed the letter and said, "Okay. Immediately order troops and set off." "Yes." Zhao Qiagong ordered to go down, and everyone was busy immediately, including the medical bills. After receiving the order, Man Bao turned around and said to Bai Shan, "Your Majesty is going to attack the city." Bai Shan, the person who sent it in, played a role. Man Bao let out an and told him, "Now your injury can get out of bed, but you can't make a big move, so don't go out and hang around. If you get hit by someone, you won't. It's easy to spot." She said, "With the war, I may not have time to come back to see you for several days." Bai Shan understood, nodded, and said, "I know, don't worry, I will be very good during this time." Man Bao gave Bai Shan to Deji and left with the cake. When she arrived at the main business, she found that Bai Erlang was standing on tiptoe on the stone and trying to look at the inner city. Man Bao asked Imperial Physician Zheng and the students to go first, while she went to Bai Erlang with the medicine box. "What are you looking at?" "Fire," Bai Erlang said, pointing to the fiery red on the horizon. "I know it's on fire, and it's been 2 hours now, but instead of going out, the fire is getting more intense. The sky is over. Do you think this fire will get out of control?" Man Bao was startled, and stood on tiptoe to look at the inner city. "Really, won't it get out of control?" The palace finally saw the fire that was soaring into the sky. The king of Goguryeo was so angry that he had to find someone to scold him, and he had to dispatch troops to put out the fire. The fire spread, and the entire street of houses would be involved in the fire. "Isn't that Gaoji's other courtyard?" the king of Goguryeo asked angrily. "Why did it catch fire when it was sealed up?" The ministers looked at each other and couldn't say anything. They could only say, "We'll find out after the investigation. The most urgent task is to put out the fire. That piece is not the residence of dignitaries, that is, the other courtyards of dignitaries, which are of great value. The courtyards of this street have been burned, and just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated and uncomfortable." That's it for tonight. The rest of the chapter will be filled up after May 1st. Good night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2772. This time, the general surnamed Qian was chosen to lead this group of 100 warriors. The reason why Zhao Qiuagong chose him is that he is loyal and brave, and that he is quick-witted in addition to being brave. He gathered everyone in one place and said, "There is still some time before Yushi, and now we will divide our troops into two places. One will go to the city gate to lurch and wait for the signal outside the city. It's best done before. General, the manpower from the Tianjing has been mobilized to put out the fire." "Very well, who is willing to go to heaven with me?" "The end will be willing to go." The burning yard and Tianjing are not on the same street, or even in the same jurisdiction, but they are so close that they are separated by two streets. Zhao Qiuagong and other generals discussed in detail, and believed that burning this yard would quickly attract the yamen who patrolled the Tianjing prison to put out the fire. After that group of people was missing, they would just go in disguised as the yamen from Goguryeo. The clothes are all prepared in advance and taken from the yamen in the small town. Although it is a bit old, the style of the clothes is the same as that in the domestic city. At first glance, there is no difference. Qian Shen will bring 49 people to change into clothes, carry a big knife openly, and rush to the outside of the prison. The heavenly prison was looser than they thought, and the two yamen guarding the gate were standing on tiptoe watching the fire not far away. The fire was so big that it felt like it would burn. Qian Kang stepped forward and reprimanded in Mandarin, "What are you doing? Are you standing guard like this on weekdays?" The two yamen shrank their necks at the reprimand, and then looked at the brand new clothes on him. Except for the clothes of the other soldiers were picked up by the former yamen in the small town. Quality officer style. The other party really lowered his head and didn't dare to look at General Qian again, because he made a mistake and even forgot the rules for entering and leaving the heavenly prison, and put people in directly. Qian Kang will bring people in with a serious face. What he did not expect is that some of the yamen in the prison have also been assigned to put out the fire, so there are not many guards in the prison at this time. Qian Kang calmly looked back at his colleagues, and when he saw the head of the prison, he took out an official document and said, "The fire is hard to control, the king is afraid that the fire will spread here, so he sent me to escort him. The fifth prince and the envoy are detained in another place." The prison head opened the official document and saw that the seal on it was correct, and even the handwriting was familiar, but why was this official document brought by the people in the palace? Shouldn't it be given to him by his boss? The head of the cell was hesitating, and General Qian hurried impatiently, "Don't hurry up and bring someone up. If the fire spreads and hurts the fifth prince and the envoy, can you afford it?" The prisoner was startled and asked quickly, "What about the other prisoners?" "This is your own business, just listen to your Shangwen's orders and ask me what to do," Qian Kang said arrogantly. "I am only responsible for the safety of the fifth prince and the mission." The head of the cell took out a money bag from his chest and stuffed it into General Qian's hand. He lowered his voice and asked, "I also ask the adults to give some advice. Your Majesty is still talking about the fifth prince and the embassy. Do you want to?" Qian Kang glanced at him, put the money bag in his arms, and said with a serious face, "You can keep some words in your heart, but you can't say them out." The prisoner's expression changed. "I didn't expect that the rumors from the streets and alleys recently turned out to be true. The emperor is really likely to surrender to Jin like the second prince and the fifth prince, so the fifth prince and the envoy have been kept for the benefit of Jin and Jin. State account." Qian Kang urged, "Hurry up, the king is still waiting to meet people." The head of the cell took the key with a dazed expression and went to pick up someone with them. He first opened the door of the fifth prince's cell. After opening it, he looked up and saw the fifth prince's face. He immediately realized that something was wrong, and was startled. "No, no, no, you are not." Qian Shen was about to use his knife, and before he could finish speaking, he wiped his neck. The head of the cell fell down with his eyes wide open, and several guards in the cell were immediately silenced by the soldiers. Qian Kang glanced back, and when he saw that there was no mistake, he gave him a wink and asked him to take him out to clean up the people outside. He opened the prison door and said to the fifth prince, whose hands and feet were trembling inside, "The fifth prince, your majesty sent me to wait and rescue you out." The fifth prince's eyes lit up and he asked in surprise, "Your majesty sent you to rescue me?" "That's right," General Qian nodded perfunctorily and asked, "Where's Mr. Zhang?" "Next door." Qian Shen will immediately turn around to look for the badge. The accommodation for the two of them was pretty good. In a separate cell, the rest of the messenger group had no such good luck, and were locked in a nest in the innermost position of the cell. Qian Kang will take people away when he releases them. The other prisoners in the prison shouted that if they didn't let them go, they would shout so loudly that they wouldn't be able to leave. Qian Kang frowned, and Zhang Hui stopped him and said, "Don't let them go. Those who can be locked up in the heavenly prison are either the most vicious people or the most wicked criminals. Letting them out will harm people." He said coldly, "Isn't the best way to get people to shut up? Just kill them." The prisoners were startled and ran away from the prison door. Although most of them were sentenced to death, there is still a difference between dying now and dying after a while. General Qian Ken said, "Sir, let's go quickly. They can call if they want. I have killed all the yamen in the prison. It is useless for them to scream. Whoever calls, I just cut it off." No one dared to speak out, silently watching the people who surrounded the fifth prince and the messenger group leave. The street was already in a mess. Zhang Hui and the fifth prince stared at the place where the fire was soaring. Qian Shenjiang subconsciously defended, "It's not all our responsibility." Zhang Hui looked back and asked, "Where are we going?" Qian Shen led them to a courtyard of the second prince of high school. "Hi-Fi Prince." General Qian Shen didn't have time to pay attention to his small emotions. After he brought people, he pulled Zhang Hui aside and whispered. The two talked for half an hour before it ended. Zhang Hui immediately went to the fifth prince with his unwashed head for more than half a month. He grabbed the fifth prince with his dirty hands and said excitedly, "Five princes, your majesty has specially sent hundreds of warriors to rescue us. Now it's time for us to repay his majesty." After saying this, he lowered his voice and said, "It's also time for me to make achievements." The fifth prince didn't feel anything in the first sentence, but he was very interested in the latter sentence. Especially when he knew that his second brother had already become a general in Jin state, and he had also been the commander-in-chief before. He also desperately needed the opportunity to make meritorious deeds, so he didn't mind the sour smell of Zhang Hui. The two held hands and closed the door to discuss things. Something's delayed until 9 p.m. Update. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2774. When Zhang Hui came out, he looked at the time, and immediately had someone pour a bucket of hot water. He directly plucked his clothes into it and washed it clean. He rubbed his hair briefly, and then thinly brushed off the stubble on his face. After shaving cleanly, it took nearly half an hour to clean up, and then put on a new hat and left with the fifth prince under the support of General Qian and others. When he was standing in front of a mansion, the fifth prince was hesitant, "Isn't looking for Prince Guang self-inflicted?" Zhang Hui looked up at this ordinary mansion in his eyes and said, "I have 50% confidence that I can convince him, plus the money to join the army, 10% more. If I still can't convince, then I can only wait for the siege time." "Try again." Zhang Hui and Prince Gao Wu went in, and they met Prince Guang smoothly, mainly because the housekeeper of Prince Guang's family was startled when he saw Prince Gao Wu, and finally lowered his head and led people in with trembling hands and feet. King Guang narrowed his pupils when he saw them, then looked at Prince Gao Wu and Zhang Hui and said, "You guys are brave enough to come to me. Now that you have escaped, if you don't leave, what are you doing here?" Prince Gao gave a deep bow to King Chongguang as he said, Uncle Wang, I beg Uncle Wang to save Gao, save the people of this whole city. Upon hearing this, King Guang sneered, you've already betrayed your country, and you still have the face of Gao Gao and the people of the city. The fifth prince of Gao hurriedly defended, Uncle Wang, Goguryeo can't beat the Jin state. I am here to protect the Gao clan, so that the ancestral temple of the Gao clan can be passed on. King Guang sneered, it's a refreshing and refined way of saying greed for life and fear of death. High five prince, but didn't the second brother also surrender? King Guang looked at him even more sternly, so you came to see the old man's jokes today. King Guang was on the side of the second prince and always believed that the second prince was more suitable for the throne than the eldest prince. Therefore, King Guang was also implicated in the attack of King Goguryeo this time. Prince Gao was about to continue his defense when Zhang Hui reached out his hand to stop him and said, His Royal Highness King Guang, then let's talk about some practical matters. The domestic city is about to be breached. Do you want to perish with the Gao family and the domestic city? King Guang pursed his lips and asked, You want to massacre the city? Zhang Hui said, Our Majesty is merciful, and naturally we will not slaughter innocent people. But not innocent people. King Guang was silent. Zhang Hui directly put forward his own conditions, as long as King Guang is willing to surrender, I am willing to protect the entire palace of King Guang before His Majesty, and even some branches of the Gao family can be preserved. He said, If you can live, why does King Guang insist on seeking death? King Guang got up and walked out of the hall, pointing to the fire in the sky and asking, Did you set this fire? Badge did not deny it. King Guang asked, Are you going to attack the city? Zhang Hui nodded, Not bad. Tell me at this time, are you not afraid that I will order the city gate to strengthen the guard at this time and let your plan fail? Zhang Hui smiled confidently, Jin state has strong troops and abundant food, but you Goguryeo are now separated from each other, and people in the domestic city are panicking. Do you think you can hold on? If you can't coerce and lure, then talk about something realistic, and everyone will talk about reality. King Guang fell silent. At this time, the Jin army had just finished ordering troops and was ambushing outside the domestic city. The attack has not yet started, and Man Bao is not busy, so he and Bai Erlang stretched their necks to see the fire in the inner city. Until the evening, the thick black smoke did not go down, and the fire was getting bigger and bigger. Even the imperial guards in the palace ran out to put out the fire, and the soldiers guarding the city were also dispatched to fetch water from the moat and nearby wells in the same relay. This kind of fire shocked everyone, for fear that the entire domestic city would be burned down. The fire is now spreading in the inner city and is about to spread to King Guang. But at this time, King Guang was not in his palace, but went to the palace to ask to see the king of Goguryeo. In the evening, when the sunset was about to fall, a signal took off outside the domestic city, and soon, a fire signal also took off in the domestic city. Because of the fire in the inner city, no one noticed these two fire letters. Upon receiving the signal, Zhao Qiuagong personally led the army to appear under the domestic city. When the soldiers on the city wall found it, they immediately beat drums as a warning. Many people ran up to the city gate to prepare bows and arrows, but at this moment, a familiar general came up to the city gate with more than 200 people, and said to the city guard, His Royal Highness Guangwang heard the drums, let me wait and come to support, and your people have gone to put out the fire. That's great, I'm worried about not having enough manpower. Look, General, this time Jin Jun seems to be playing for real. The city guard immediately looked away from the people in front of him. Seeing the dense Jin army and the ramming gateposts in their hands, he couldn't help frowning, really? It's getting dark, why are you attacking the city at this time? Because it takes time for their news to be sent out, and only at this time will they have a chance to get into the tower after sieging the city. The people sent by King Guang and the city guards had seen each other and had an impression of each other, So he had no doubts and immediately let them take them to lead bows and arrows. He said, "Let's take a look at the situation first. If the Jin army enters the range, they will shoot arrows. If they don't enter, we will not provoke them." The fate of Shenming and his army made them very cautious about fighting against the Jin army now, not only to prevent the Jin army from killing them, but also to prevent them from being abandoned by the domestic city and the palace. Zhao Qiuagong did not stop, and directly ordered to ram the city gate. This was unexpected by the people on the tower. The city guard saw them entering the range and immediately shouted the order, "Quick shot, quick shot." He shouted, "Grandma, Jin Jun must have seen the fire in our city. He knew that we were too busy to take care of ourselves, so he came to the palace. Hurry up and send someone to the fire field to call someone." Just after giving the order, the first platoon of soldiers who raised their hands to shoot arrows was smeared by the people behind them. The city guard stared at them in disbelief. Before he could finish speaking, a knife slashed in the face. He immediately raised the knife to block it, and when he saw the knife, he was shocked. "This is Jin's knife, you are Jin." The tower was in chaos, and the people under the tower also carried the bumper and ran to the gate of the city. Everyone shouted and bumped into it little by little. Qian Kenjun killed a lot of people on the tower, and attracted the Goguryeo soldiers downstairs to come up for reinforcements. The screams of killing from the tower were loud, but because of the fire in the inner city, no one could hear it except the people who lived nearby. Those people looked in the windows of their own houses, and quickly closed the door with a snap, shrinking back and pretending that they couldn't see or hear. Qian can kill several people. Under the cover of his comrades, he pushed the wooden bolt on the city gate to the other side. Before he could completely take it down, he was rushed up by the Goguryeo soldiers. He could only turn around to resist. See you at 11 o'clock. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2775. The soldiers outside the door hit the door more than 20 times. Under the constant impact of the battering pole, and Qian Kang and others moved some latches inside, the latch of the gate finally fell with a bang, and the big pole couldn't grasp it. If it hits the body, it can smash the internal organs of the person. The gate opened, and the army instantly stormed into the city. The belated reinforcements blocked the people on the street, where the two armies were fighting, shouting and killing. At this time, King Guang pulled King Goguryeo to stand on a high platform in the palace, pointed to the place and said, "Brother Wang, see. The Jin army has already invaded the city. Even if we have a lot of troops in the city, I can't resist them, and the city's destruction is inevitable." King Goguryeo expression changed and he asked, "How did they get into the city?" Guangwang said, "They can rescue the fifth prince and the envoys from the prison, and they also set a fire in the inner city. How difficult is it to open another city gate?" Only then did King Goguryeo know about the heavenly prison. He glanced at King Guang in disbelief and then looked at his cronies. The confidant immediately went to the Tianjing to ask questions, but before he left the palace, soldiers rushed to report, "The west gate is broken, the Jin army has entered the city, and Gaonasa has already led the troops to resist. Let the king lead the minister with him. Let's go now." The cronies can only hurriedly go back to report, and they have priorities. Obviously, this matter is more urgent than going to Tianjing. The king of Goguryeo confirmed the matter of the west city gate, and no longer wondered whether the fifth was running away, and asked the king of Guang with a sullen face, "Are you here to persuade Gu to escape?" "No," King Guang said, "the world is so big, where can I escape to? And the ancestral temple can't be denied." He said, "Your Majesty, for the sake of the ancestral temple, let's descend." King Goguryeo face darkened. Am I going to be the king of a subjugated country? He was obviously not happy. In the 2 generations of his grandfather and father, the former destroyed the suzerain state, and the latter cut off the pilgrimage of Silla and Baikya, and directly accepted the two countries as vassals. Even if he can't compare with them, he should not be too bad. Guangwang said, at least the ancestral temple and the lives of the entire clan can be saved. As long as you are alive, everything is possible. He said softly, Brother Wang, you annoyed the Emperor of Jin. If he directly slaughtered the royal family, then we will have nothing. On the contrary, as long as we surrender, we may manage this land. Given time. He said with a long look, there will always be times when Jin will change the emperor, and there will also be times when the emperor faints. King Goguryu's eyes flashed and he became thoughtful. This is indeed what King Guang thinks in his mind. Zhang Hui cannot threaten him or tempt him, but he can list the facts with him. He will seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, and choose the best path for the ancestral temple and the Gao clan. The king of Goguryeo struggled for a while, and finally closed his eyes when the sky was completely dark, and under the impact of the screams of killing from the west and the firelight of the inner city alternately, he agreed. So first the cronies took the imperial decree written by him and went to the west city gate to declare the decree, and then he personally appeared on the battlefield in a white robe. The soldiers of the two armies, who had temporarily stopped fighting, watched the appearance of the king of Goguryeo. Zhao Qiuagong snorted coldly, turned his head and commanded, report this matter to your majesty. Someone immediately left. Man Bao was healing someone when he heard a soldier riding a horse and shouting as he ran towards the main tent, the king of Goguryeo has descended, the king of Goguryeo has descended. The surrender came unexpectedly, not to mention by Erlang, even Man Bao was stunned, this is the end. The passing Lord Fang heard it and almost vomited blood, do you still think it's too early? Do you know how much we have paid for this day and how long we have been preparing? Let's not talk about the siege in front, let's talk about the arrangement they made after Qi Baihe Li was injured and the morale of the other party rose again. Three sides of the inner city are now occupied by the Jin army, just to put pressure on them, not to mention that they have been going to put up Kongming lanterns every day these days. In order to copy those contents, these civil servants almost broke their hands. There are also the 100 warriors who sneaked into the inner city through the moat, as well as the calculations and strategies of Zhang Hui and others. Which one of these piles is easy? Master Fang glanced at the two of them, and finally landed on Zhou Man. Master Zhou is busy, but he has been busy with one thing, so he thinks it is easy. However, those officials who made documents, wrote imperial decrees, and reviewed ZZ and ZZZZ knew that they had prepared a lot of things overtly and secretly for today's achievements, and naturally they also sacrificed a lot. Bai Erlang asked, is Mr. Fang busy now? Mr. Fang immediately said, I'm busy, your medical bills are somewhat different from ours. Come and check with us. The king of Goguryeo surrendered, the war is over, and we have to prepare for the return trip. By the way, Mr. Bai's injury, how's it going? Man Bao said, it's almost ready, don't worry. Mr. Fang was not at all relieved, but said, if Mr. Zhou has a good prescription, remember to prescribe it to him and let him return to Zhongsha province earlier. He was busy, and now he still had to shoulder nearly half of Bai Shan's work. During the period when Bai Shan was injured, he slept no more than 3 hours a day. Man Bao looked at his face, and probably felt embarrassed, so he said, his wound is shallow, and it has been scabbed over this time, so he can do some work that is not tiring. Master Fang was overjoyed, really? Man Bao nodded. Mr. Fang decided to go to Bai Shan to talk about working hours in person after returning to the small town. But soon, they received news that everyone directly entered the inner city, and even some officials and Bai Shan who stayed in the small city were also picked up. The emperor lived directly in the royal palace of Goguryeo, and the Gao family was temporarily imprisoned, including King Guang's family. Only the king of Goguryeo was free and was dragged by the emperor to live in the palace together. But the king of Goguryeo was not happy at all, he felt that the emperor of Jin was enticing him to kill the emperor, or that the emperor wanted to kill him. So even if he sleeps in the place he is most familiar with, he doesn't feel safe, and he can't sleep all night. The emperor didn't know whether he really didn't know, or pretended he didn't know, and asked Zhou Man and Lu Tai Zheng to go to the king of Goguryeo with a worried look. When they were all finished, the emperor left Zhou Man alone to speak. For some unknown reason, the emperor seldom concealed his malice in front of Zhou Man, so he asked directly, "Is King Goguryeo the Prime Minister of Longevity?" Man Bao was stunned for a while and then shook his head. "He is indulging in pleasure, and his kidneys are at a loss. How can he live a long life?" "Emperor," Zhou Qing, "although you are an imperial physician, you are also a woman, so things like kidney essence should be more euphemistically." Man Bao, "His waist is not good." The emperor skipped this question and asked, "How long can I live? I hope it will be 2 or 3 years, not too long." Man Bao, "How can a person's lifespan be certain? If he thinks about the pain now and starts to take care of his body, it will be fine for him to live another 20 or 30 years. Died in a few years." The emperor thought about it, so the next day he sent the concubines of the king of Goguryeo and the beautiful maids in his palace to him. Euphemistically, they could not be separated from each other, and the lovers would eventually become dependents. Category. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2776. When Bai Shan moved to the inner city with the logistics staff, the fire in the inner city was extinguished with the joint efforts of the soldiers of Jin and Goguryeo. At this time, the weather was dry, the houses were flammable, and there was little water. The Goguryeo people had been delayed for too long, because it was the inner city that was burning, and people from the outer city did not go in to put out the fire, and only depended on some servants in the inner city. And the soldiers and yeomen, not to mention the speed is not fast, the West Gate is still fighting. It is equivalent to half the fire and then went to war. The firefighting officials wanted to directly demolish a few houses, so as to contain the spread of the fire, but the people living in the inner city are either rich or expensive, and no one is willing to demolish the houses in advance when the fire does not burn to them. Why sacrifice their house to fight the fire? Not to mention the cost of the house itself, the furniture inside is also very expensive, okay. So no one wants to. After the Jin army took over the inner city, the emperor directly sent Ashina to put out the fire. He was no longer so gentle, and ordered a dozen houses directly. The Jin army took the Goguryeo soldiers who had just been captured, and directly pushed down these dozen houses, then carried water from the outer city, and delivered water to put out the fire in a relay. It took most of the night to put out the fire, and at this time, the fire burned half of the inner city, and even the Guangguangfu was not spared. Looking at the half of the inner city that was turned into ashes, the emperor sighed slightly, turned his head and asked, "How many of the 100 warriors who entered the city survived?" 43 people. The emperor nodded and instructed, "Take their corpses and take them back, I promise they will come true, hide this matter, and send the remaining 43 people back to the capital ahead of schedule to reward them with other military exploits." The emperor was worried that the subordinates on the Goguryeo side knew that they set the fire and asked them to hand over the people. Although both parties have their own speculations, the other party has no evidence. The emperor will definitely not recognize it, but he must also beware of someone getting angry and angry. After all, the inner city of the domestic city has indeed suffered heavy losses this time. General Ashina said, "The remaining 43 people are in the hospital account for their injuries." The emperor nodded, "Let Zhou Man give them good medicine." Then he ordered, "Go alone, call Shuigui and Niu Shishi who are still out. The king of Goguryeo has surrendered, and let them take the documents signed by the king of Goguryeo with them." Zhao Qiuagong responded, yes. Your Majesty, what will the Gao royal family do? After a little thought, the emperor called everyone to ask for a solution. Bai Shan was also called over and sat with Mr. Fang Bai Erlang. Someone said, Your Majesty, Liao Dong has only gone through the war, and it is the time when stability is needed, so why not use the Gao family to stabilize people's hearts? No, if it's still managed by the Gao family, what's the difference between Goguryeo or not? We attacked Goguryeo because they neglected the suzerain state. Now that they have been subdued, it is better to hand over Liaodong to their management. There are Silla and Baikya in the south of Goguryeo. By their three countries, Liaodong can be stable. The emperor glanced at the civil servant who was speaking, and tried hard to hold back his breath. He was a king who was good at giving advice and couldn't do such a thing. He was embarrassed to do it, and Bai Shan and Bai Erlang were embarrassed. Bai Erlang was the first to take a breath out of his nose and snorted, and the voice was so clear that everyone could hear it. Zhao Qiuagong, who was about to refute the opponent, stopped, and everyone looked at it together. Bai Erlang's face flushed, and he could only say, if it's just to teach them a lesson, then the price we pay is too high, right? But I have gained a lot, the civil official said. After this war, the surrounding countries will no longer dare to provoke our country easily, and the border will be stable for 100 years. Pull it down, let alone 100 years, who will remember this great achievement 20 years later? Compared with fear, hatred is more likely to breed, and hatred can make people strive to become stronger. Why do they only take fame and not take the most practical benefits? Bai Shandao, why should they be restrained, if all three countries accept it? Everyone looked at Bai Shan together, and even Zhao Qiuagong looked him up and down in surprise. The official blushed, and immediately objected, Silla and Baikya have nothing wrong, so how could they attack for no reason? Bai Shan, I didn't say I would fight now. He said, Your Majesty, this minister looks at Baikya very arrogantly. There will be more mistakes in the future, and if it is for peace at the border, our country and Silla Baikya are fine, so why should there be a Goguryeo in the middle? That's right, Zhao Qiuagong retracted his gaze and said, Silla and Baikya are at odds, and the two countries have disputes from time to time. If you want to maintain the stability of the border, my suzerain country just needs to lift and press the other, why do you need to place one in the middle? Goguryeo. The Liaodong area is originally under the management of the Central Plains. If it weren't for the wars in the Central Plains in the previous dynasties, the Gao family would not be able to establish a country here. Now is the time to take it back. How to arrange so many people from the Gao royal family? The king of Goguryeo surrendered. He was not captured like King Jao Kang. Dajin always treated the surrendered royal family preferentially. Bai Shan said, Your Majesty can bring the king of Goguryeo and several princes back to the capital, and give them an official title, so that they can also take a look at the scenery and prosperity of Chang'an. He said, since the king of Goguryeo took over, Goguryeo has added gifts many times, all because of the extravagance of the king of Goguryeo, but after all, Liaodong is bitter and cold, and most luxury items are shipped from the Central Plains. Since you love the things from the Central Plains so much, why not bring them? How about taking it to Chang'an to enjoy it? The emperor agreed, King Goguryeo and King Guang know the righteousness very well, and I would like to entrust them with titles and support them with salaries and fields. The ministers looked at each other and asked, what about the others? After thinking about it, the emperor said, check out the list of Gao's royal family, as well as the list of people who were burned down by the fire in the inner city. It will take some time to rebuild the inner city. Let's move them all to the inland. Immediately someone asked, where are you moving to? There are more people and less land in the Central Plains, so we can no longer move to the Central Plains. The Lingnan area is vast and sparsely populated. And the northwest area? It's not right, there are still some scumbags in the northwest, so it's better to separate them. Lingnan is too far? It's very hot, I'm afraid people from Liaodong will not be able to adapt. How about Jiangnan? It's not bad over there. There are not too many people, but the place is quite big. I heard that things can be grown on the mountain. That's right, aren't many teas coming from Lingnan and Jiangnan now? I think the tea in Liaodong is sky high, and they should also like tea very much. So the matter was settled like this, and everyone ignored what the civil official said to show the generosity and tolerance of the suzerain. The emperor was very satisfied with the result. Since the tone has been set, the rest will be left to Zhao Shangshu and the others. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2777. The second High Prince and the fifth Prince did not attend this meeting, so they did not know how to deal with the Gao royal family. When they knew, the list was almost sorted out. They will follow the army back to the central plains, and then separate halfway. The selected people will go all the way south, just in time. When they arrive at the place, it happens to be spring, and they can divide the land for cultivation. Niu Shishi and Shuigui came back with their soldiers and horses, and then the emperor gave them more soldiers and horses, and asked them to go south and east in 2 directions, and take down all the cities with the certificate of surrender of the king of Goguryeo. By the time Silla and Baikyu received the news, Niu Shishi had already taken over Pyongyang. The kings of Silla and Baikyu were shocked, and while quietly reaching out to collect some of the small towns that bordered, they sent people to the inner city to meet the emperor with credentials and tributes. But faster than their envoys was the impeachment of Shuigui and Niu Shishi. Think they don't know if they reach out quietly? No one is a fool. Before they came out, they had obtained the territory map given by the king of Goguryeo, which had removed the cities and places occupied by the 2 countries before the autumn. That's all for Silla. Anyway, it has always respected Dajin. Dajin asked him to send troops, and he also sent troops. Although the troops and horses were few, they contributed to the destruction of Goguryeo. Dajin's monarchs and ministers reluctantly one eye closed and the other let go. But what happened to Baikyu? Therefore, before Baikyu's national letter reached the inner city, the Dajin's reprimand came to Baikyu first. The emperor counted their sins and asked them to return the Goguryeo land they occupied during this period to Niu Shishi, otherwise they would be responsible for the consequences. As for Silla, the emperor did not reprimand, but after accepting their credentials and tribute, he returned something to them. Baikyu was too aggrieved, but Niu Shishi's troops had already taken over Pyongyang and headed south. They stayed directly at the border and were intimidated by the majesty of Dajin. They had to retreat and return the city they occupied to Dajin. At this point, Dajin really took back the entire Goguryeo kingdom. Through consultation with Zhao Qiuagong and others, the emperor established the Gao Prefecture Governor's Mansion, the Liaocheng Prefecture Governor's Mansion, the Jiunan Axis Governor's Mansion and the Andongduhu Mansion on the land of Goguryeo. The reason why the Governor's Mansion was set up, rather than the state and county, was because these places were easy to conquer. Although the emperors within the jurisdiction had removed some of them, there were still many leaders. Even when Goguryeo was there, it was difficult for them to go beyond these local leaders to directly administer local government affairs, and the local people were more willing to obey the leadership and orders of the leaders. These leaders and the people under their jurisdiction all have kinship relationships. The emperor can move some landlords, officials, and wealthy businessmen to the interior, but it is difficult to move these ethnic leaders. Otherwise, a place that is not good and only calmed down is afraid that there will be another war. Therefore, after consulting a lot of information and fully understanding with the old ministers of Goguryeo, the civil officials headed by Bai Shan suggested that the emperor rule safely, and wait for these leaders and people to be Chinese enough in the future. After thinking about it all night, the emperor agreed, so he set up the governor's office in the 3 places, and selected the local headman to be the leader. Among them, the governor of Jiunan Prefecture's governor's mansion was the original city lord of Jiunan City. This city lord is very interesting. Since the beginning of the war, he has been taking Jiunan City's soldiers, horses, and people to hide in the city. Whether it was Liaodong City in the northeast, or Ungshi City in the east, he was attacked and called for help. Although the emperor felt that this person was not a loyal person, but after understanding the current situation of Jiunan City, he felt that he was still responsible for the people under his jurisdiction, so he still used him as the governor of Jiunan Prefecture. But for a large piece of land south of Ungshi City, the emperor was reluctant to set up the governor's mansion. Bai Shan also believed that these governors needed supervision, so he suggested, "Why don't your majesty set up a governor's mansion?" The Dudu's mansion and the Duhu's mansion are the same in the imperial rank, but the relevant policies are not at all different. The governors of the governor's house are usually the local leaders. As long as they don't make big mistakes, their family can still be hereditary. The military and politics under their jurisdiction are managed by themselves, and they have the right to appoint and remove to a certain extent. Almost there. It's just that the emperor divided the territory that belonged to the king of Goguryeo into 4, and chose someone who was not from the Gao clan to be the leader, and the Dudu's office had to create a register for the people under its jurisdiction, and pay taxes to the court. However, the Duhu in the Duhu mansion was dispatched by the imperial court, and the army was also dispatched by the imperial court, which had stronger control over it. The reason why Chen Bing set up the Andong Duhufu at the southernmost side of the three governors' mansions was to deter Silla and Baikya, and also to isolate the connection between the three governors' mansions above and Silla's Baikya. The Duhufu has the responsibility of comforting the vassals and pacifying foreign invaders. It has great power and has military power in its hands. Here, the sky is high and the emperor is far away. The emperor was distressed for several days and did not choose a suitable candidate. He saw that Bai Shan's injury seemed to be almost healed. Most of the edicts in the past few days were in his hands, so he invited him to question him, "Who do you think is suitable for the court in the Anton Protectorate?" Bai Shan thought for a while and then said, "Your Majesty, why don't you ask who is willing to serve?" The emperor said, "The frontier officials of the 3rd grade, they still don't like it." Bai Shan said, "Your Majesty, Anton is too far away. Is there an Z1? So how many ministers in the DPRK are willing to go to Angzi?" The emperor choked. When he sent his nephew to the Angzi Protectorate, didn't the people of the Chai family cry quietly? The emperor twitched the corners of his mouth and asked, "There are always people willing to go, right?" "Naturally there are, but those who are willing to go may not be suitable," said Bai Shan. "Your Majesty, Goguryeo only conquered, and neither Silla nor Baikya are good friends. Those who come must be able to command the army and manage the region, so that this area can be peacefully settled as soon as possible. But in addition, this person must be loyal to the court, otherwise, after a few decades, Anton will no longer be the Anton they just laid." The emperor naturally knew this, and this was where he hesitated. He asked, "Since you can ask these questions, you obviously already have a solution. Let's talk about it." Bai Shan suggested Niu Shishi. "He has made great achievements in this campaign, and His Majesty has seen his ability. He has the ability to command troops and the ability to govern local areas. Why not use him?" "Emperor, Yingzhou is Xia's Hu, and the prefect only has 5 grades. This time, he even jumped 4 grades. Bai Shan hurriedly said, "Your Majesty looks at talent in terms of people, so why should you be so constrained by grades?" The emperor pondered. He originally wanted to pick someone from the officials in the capital, but no matter how he picked, he couldn't pick the right one. However, the emperor did not make a decision immediately, and waved to Bai Shan, "I understand, you should step back first." Bai Shan got up and stepped back. "See you at 11 o'clock.